All righty. We're going to keep moving on. We've only got 2/3 of the agenda left to go. All right. We are at 11.0, which is the superintendent's report, and so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Little for a little while.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. What I wanted to do was tonight to just take a few minutes to talk about what's happening in our schools in relation to COVID and the impact it's happening on our staff, the impact that it's having on our staff, rather. We'll do another Where We Stand Wednesday tomorrow, but just to give you a little perspective tonight, and I took my numbers down. Mr. Caldwell gave you some other numbers. I took my numbers down at 2 p.m. today was when I checked the dashboard, and at that time, we had more than 500 employees that were out with a COVID-related absence. That number kind of fluctuates, through the afternoon. It'll start gaining actually after 2 p.m. Some employees will come off, and then it'll start the process again the next day. So 2 p.m. kind of finds it right in the middle. It'll probably be more if I check now, but in the morning it'll be maybe a little less. But then it'll start climbing up, and we'll do the whole pattern all over again. We are currently waiting. At that time, we were waiting on 147 test results. But because of the staff shortage we are facing, staff are allowed to stay at work as long as they are asymptomatic and wear a mask. This is certainly helping us keep the doors open, and we're trying to take advantage of that. But even with these new guidelines, we have a number of schools that are still facing staff shortages. 11 schools at that time had 15% or more of their staff out. 10 schools have, that's core staff rather, and then 10 schools have 15% of all staff out. This is important because we've been told to expect a peak that still might be a week to 14 days away, kind of depending on where it's at. And if our current community spread, and our community spread today topped 5,000, it was 5,094, I think is what the number was. We may still have a tough couple of staffing weeks ahead of us if it's still truly another 2 weeks away before it stopped, because what we're experiencing is actually staff being sick and unable to come to work. The long weekend, very helpful. Certainly our faculty numbers coming back, because we had a number of faculty members coming back to work today and tomorrow. That helped. We had a handful of schools that today were really stretched thinly, but they've got reinforcements on the way this week, so we decided to hold on to them as long as we could to make sure they could stay in, and we've done that. Last week, as you know, we had to shift River Bluff for 3.5 days to a virtual learning environment. Monday, we had to shift Centerville Elementary School to a virtual learning environment, and then today, we had to shift Saxagotha Elementary School. They were one of those schools that we were trying to hang on to for another couple days, and there were just too many staff members continued to ask out today because of, not ask out, they would be out because they were sick.
Dr. Little, and just real, sorry to interrupt, but I mean, COVID is having a significant impact, but this is the middle of January. There's all the usual stomach bugs and.
Sure, that's a fair question. So, on a normal day, you never have 100% attendance. I don't know that I ever worked at a school that ever had 100% attendance on any given day. You have people out because their mom's sick. You have people out because they have a child that might have the stomach bug, and they're out taking care of their young child. Flat tire on the way to work. We've had people that went and got snowed in North Carolina this weekend. They had vacation plans, and they've not been able to come back yet. So you've got any number of reasons that the number of staff are coming out, and then you add the fact that the staff are testing positive and are sick. That certainly exacerbates that as well. So what we're trying to do is communicate with our families as early as possible. So far, we've been able, I believe if I'm right when I'm saying this, Ms. McPhail, but we've been able to send out a letter warning a school if it's getting really close, to be very specific about that school and say, hey, just be aware that we've got some numbers that are approaching this, and please make sure you're aware. So we can announce, hey, be ready for your plan, for either inclement weather or COVID. Coincidentally enough, this is the first winter that I've been here that we've actually had winter weather. Even the threat of winter weather, it's not happened for the last 6 years. And so, you need to have a plan. And we can talk about that globally, but I think it's something more specific when you get your principal, when Nicole Mitchell emails you and says, hey, listen, this is happening at our school, at ABC School. Let's be prepared. So we've been trying to do that. We're going to continue to do that. I believe every school that is really in that above 15% right now, most of them have had some type of contact, if it looks like things are getting a little wonky there. I do want to again say, though, that if the peak continues to grow and it gets to 7,000 or somewhere in that ballpark, which is kind of what it might get to if it continues to go up 200 points a day, we're going to continue to try to make school-by-school decisions. That's been our guide. You talked about, I appreciate you interested, the evolution of kind of our thinking of this. The first year it was really kind of everybody doing the same thing at once and kind of a one-size-fits-all. And then as we grew to understand what we were looking at, we've been able to make more specific changes. We're not making district-wide decisions. That's not a criticism of people who have made district-wide decisions. That's just not the approach we've decided. If there's a problem at Centerville, we want to do something at Centerville. That doesn't necessarily mean Pillion Elementary School should have to do an action because something happened at Centerville. So that's been the line of reasoning up to this point. I do just want to say, if the peak gets to 7,000, I don't know what impact that will have on the district in terms of staffing. But we're going to continue to do the school-by-school decision and trying to give as much time as possible. I also want to, as we're talking about it, I really want to give kudos to our HR team. Yesterday during a holiday, and she would never say this about herself because, she believes in hard work and it's important to work hard. But yesterday, Ms. Price and her team were working anywhere between 10 and 14 hours. They had 185 phone calls that had to be made yesterday. And these are not phone calls like, hi, who is this? What's your name? Each phone call takes a significant amount of time. We've trained more people to also try to do this, but it's one of those things I compare it to is really what happens when I try to help my wife cook in the kitchen, is that sometimes, it's easier for her to do it because she knows how to do it. And it's one of the challenges with this particular, how we're contacting our employees to make sure they're okay to come to work the next day. So a lot of work and a lot of action are taking place on that. And I just want to, I want to say thank you to Mrs. Price, Kimberly Freeman, and I don't want to leave anybody out, but just kind of to your whole team. And Ms. Price, would you like to add anything to that?
Absolutely, I would. I would love to shout out to my team. 185 was just yesterday. That's certainly not the whole weekend. And we are working very fiercely, but we believe adamantly in trying to have those conversations with employees because they have questions and they're sick and they don't feel good and their child's sick and all these things are happening to them. So we want to be that HR team. We're doing the best we can to reach out to those people, make sure we answer their questions, we get them the help they need. If they need testing, that we assist them in getting there, those types of things. So that has kept us very busy. But to Dr. Little's point, there's a lot of ambiguity in the work. I think he quoted some numbers while ago. We're at 539 staff out. To Jeff's point, as of right this second, it changes quite frequently. About 234 of those are staff positives. For example, yesterday, the 185, over half of those were really sick. It wasn't just quarantine or isolating, because we have tried to implement the new rules. We started that today, full force, where teachers could stay home if they were asymptomatic, or could come to work if they were asymptomatic. But a lot of them are really sick. And, they're tired and they're pulling weight. And I'm so proud of our schools and our employees and our administrators and our teachers, because everybody is pitching in. We talked to our principal today, and she said, I just finished taking out the trash. I just dropped off the lunches in another classroom. everybody's doing things that are outside of their realm. Secretaries are subbing. People are just going above and beyond to make it work in schools. And I know they're tired. I know it's impacting the morale and the stamina. And to Dr. Little's point also, there is a point where that has a cost on our people. And so we do have to kind of think about that, especially in these difficult times of recruiting and people leaving. We have to think about how we can support them. But also keeping in mind our duty to students and knowing that it's best for them to be in school, and balancing that instructional piece is always tired and tiring. We know going virtual impacts families, and that makes that difficult as well. So we're trying to make the best decisions possible, balancing a lot of things and supporting our staff. And we just appreciate everybody's support in that and helping us get through that time. So,
Can I ask a question? How is because we're kind of in the throes of it right now, how is the COVID relief, the CRA leave that the board approved back in the fall?
Yep.
Is that holding up? Is it sufficient? Is it helping staff?
So Jeff's team helped me kind of pull that together today to kind of look at that and make sure we were feeling okay about it. To your point, it feels like a lot of people are out. So, how close are they? About 42% of our employees have used CRA in some form or fashion. We have about 2.4% that have exhausted their leave. And about 4% of those who are out were district determined work exposures, but which we don't count as CRA. We just, give them the credit for that. So about 2.4% that are out, but our other 98% still are going strong. And of course, these new rules will help with that some as well.
And so, again, thank you, Mrs. Price, for that. Also, just very quickly, I know Dr. Osmer Smith is in the room tonight. So, Dr. Smith, if you'd like to talk just a little bit about a return to school plan, you brought that up just a question ago. So I want to kind of add to that for just 1 second. I think we have a slide about that.
As we laid out in our plan in the summer that we did present to you back in June, we do have periodic updates that we do throughout the year. Those updates are based on DHEC guidance as well as support from the Department of Education. And what you see on the screen tonight is based on our most recent review. It specifically addresses the elementary school procedures for high community spread, and that's found in the modifying facilities section of our plan. So in the original initial wording of the plan, we specifically talked about how schools in elementary would go to the family model, which you know well from our meetings last year. And that included having small groups of instruction inside the classroom, as well as adjusting how students move throughout the building. We described what it looked like, and we also talked about it happening immediately when high spread occurred. In the new wording on the screen that you see, please note that elementary schools will still leverage those small groups in classrooms. However, we will use a typical instructional model for things like related arts and recess. We will, though, still adjust entry and dismissal procedures at high spread, as well as lunch and breakfast procedures during high spread. Finally, schools will make this shift to the high procedures within 3 days, once the community spread has stayed at high for 3 consecutive days. So the reason why we're doing that is to give schools a chance to adjust procedures, communicate those to staff members, and help children to make the shift. And so we are excited to bring this to you tonight, and I'm certainly available now to answer any questions you may have.
So it's a minor procedure. I mean, there's minor things. I think
Very
really the
small
big
change.
difference is about the cafeteria.
Right. So for cafeteria, some schools have very large, because every school's footprint's a little bit different. Some schools have very large cafeterias. Some schools have very small cafeterias. So we did, when we talked with principals about this and got their support on the language, we talked about giving them some flexibility in what that looks like. So for instance, Pleasant Hill Elementary has a very small cafeteria. So they often go to a family model for lunch versus a Meadow Glen Elementary with a much bigger footprint. They may have 1 or 2 classes in there, but spaced apart. That way students, the the family model that you know from before we can keep kids safe during the lunch period, but we can get them out of their classroom more when we can.
Okay, this is Jada, thank you. So is this the safe return
Yes.
plan? Does this have to go through the whole community feedback process before it's submitted again?
So the way the rules are, or the way that we were asked to take these plans and updates, we take them to our advisory groups. That included all three: parent advisory, staff advisory, and teacher advisory. We also took it to the principals of the schools who would be affected. They gave us feedback, and we adjusted wording accordingly.
Okay, and so this is the only change?
This is
that was
the
made?
only change in our plan.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So that's the COVID, the COVID impact where we are. Again, just we're going to continue to communicate with our parents, make sure they know when there are things happening that could impact them. Just an aside, I would also encourage everybody to pay attention to the weather forecast on Friday. There may be a chance of bad weather coming in. And again, I think it's important you know what you're going to do when schooling has to change suddenly. We try to give as much time as possible for that, but we'll actually start breaking down those forecasts. We've already had some preliminary decisions on that. So we'll start breaking down those forecasts in more detail tomorrow, kind of where they are, and talk to them through Thursday. Also wanted just to give the board a quick update. We're going to be revising our board visits and how we visit. We're going to be sending that to you kind of in the next week or so. We'd like to get out of the COVID surge first, but be on the lookout. I think this system is going to be better for you. It's going to be better for the schools. The goal really is to be more flexible and agile, so you're able to visit schools when it better suits your schedule. To be a little less formal for both the board and the school and the members of the school staff, and we're going to be but now having said that, there are a couple of things we do that kind of harken back to the old way we do things. We want to put together a tour of Lakeside for you in the coming weeks, and I know Lexington Technology Center has requested perhaps a lunch to have their students cook for you. Their culinary arts students cook for you. If you've never eaten the culinary arts students' food at LTC, it will be a treat. So there'll be, while we're changing the overall thing, there are
Private
a couple
property.
of things. Yeah, they all,
And
a
private
lot of them work
property.
at private property if you ever eaten there. So it's really good. So there'll be some of those kinds of things, but the standard visitation thing, we'll get you all that information out probably in the next week or 10 days. Is that right, Ms. Gaskins? And thank you to Mary Gaskins and to Dr. Clamp for helping us figure that out. So I have more information for you very soon. And finally, I just want to say, I want to personally recognize and thank the board. This is Board Appreciation Month. Just want to thank you for all your dedication to our stakeholders. The work you do here, the steadfast guidance that you provide in the community is really a testimony to your passion for the district, and we are very thankful for that. Certainly these last 2 years have created challenges that we've never seen before, and we've come up with solutions that are completely novel, and I just want to thank you all for everything you've done to help make good decisions based upon the staff and students. And so that's my official board presentation. What I would like to do tonight is, so we had an e-learning day last week. Funny is the inclement weather was not actually snow. I mean, all my friends from North Carolina are posting all these pictures. My brother sending me videos of he and his wife sledding down his hill in his front yard, and it rained. So we actually missed because of some really unsafe wind conditions. It wasn't actually the snow and sleet and those kinds of things. But I'd like for Dr. Rivers to talk about what that shift to an e-learning thing did, because really interesting was that was a tough day to have to shift because we had been on break, and so there wasn't like a day to come back, everybody get ready, and then shift. We called a 2-hour delay that morning just to provide some context because we thought maybe we could get to school that day face-to-face. And then as we continued to meet with the weather people, they said this is still going to continue throughout the morning. So we wanted to make sure So we went ahead and moved it to a whole day. So the fact that that our schools were able to shift, even not just the night before, but actually the morning of. So I'm going to provide that context and turn it over to Dr. Rivers.